Good morning, everyone. Morning. I will speak, let me just speak very briefly about the Poole Grant program. We'll hear from 4 students who have done really interesting things through that program. And I want to really encourage you to think about doing it. And Shelby and Jusung and Carl and Katie will talk about their experiences, and a number of other students could as well. At the end of their presentation, I will also I want to do the class committees. I'd rather do that at the end, obviously, rather than the beginning. So after Jusung speaks, I'll come back up very quickly for those announcements. Let me just say a word, as I do every year, about the Poole Grant program, because it's one that I'm really proud of. It's critical to the school. It's one of the endowed programs that's been around a long time. Bob Poole was a Taft graduate from 1950. He was a distinguished graduate at the time. He was an avid football player, very good as well. And then he came back after going to Yale and taught and coached at Taft from 1956 to 62. And those of you who play on the football team will know that the bleachers were devoted to him after his death, and it was a way of keeping his legacy alive as a football coach and as a graduate. But he did something else as well. After he graduated from Taft and then finished teaching, he went into the Peace Corps, and with the first graduating class, if you will, of the Peace Corps that was started by President Kennedy. And it was a time in our nation in the early 60s of great idealism, a sense of service to the world. And he undertook his Peace Corps time, which was a 2-year stint, in Africa. And his love of African wildlife and conservation and working with indigenous peoples began there. And he was the director of the African Wildlife Leadership Program. It was an internationally known organization. He was a great conservationist and a courageous leader in a place that's quite dangerous, frankly. In 1978, he was killed in a car accident in Nairobi, and the outpouring of support for Bob Poole was huge, from his classmates, from faculty members, from people he had coached. And so we started the Poole Grant program, and it started very humbly. The idea was simply, we had money that was donated by alumni who wanted to honor him, with the idea that any student could apply, and it would be a way to permit, or frankly, to encourage students to do work in conservation, community service, anywhere in the world. And that program began, I remember the first year we did it, there were only 2 students who did it, and it has blossomed, and now it's a wonderful program. How does it work? Mrs. Frew oversees the process. She couldn't be here today, but if you get interested, in particular after hearing from these students, she will send out materials about it. Essentially what you're doing is you're applying for money to support you to go off and do community service, especially in particular if it has to do with conservation, but in any way in which you can serve. These programs have varied. They've been all over the globe. I looked last year. We had programs, students go off to Costa Rica, Peru, Dominican, Guatemala, Nicaragua, India. We've had some more domestically. Carl will talk about that. I would strongly encourage you to think about these. They're wonderful programs. We all know that those experiences in which you serve others are deeply meaningful. In my years as a college student, I remember being a big brother for a disadvantaged student, and it really was an amazing experience for me. I remember taking a soccer trip for a cultural exchange and service trip to Cuba once with a bunch of soccer players here, and I've never forgotten those. So I would strongly encourage you to think about them, be inspired by the stories you hear from these guys, and if you are at all interested, you want to learn more, see either me or Mrs. Frew. When you think about the programs, remember, you should present something that would honor Bob Poole's legacy, that in some way has to do with service, and in some way embodies the school motto. And if you present something like that, there's a good likelihood that the school would fund you. You get to go off and do something fantastic. We pay for it, and just as you'll hear in a second, you bring back your experience to the school. It changes you, and it changes and betters the school. So with no further ado, you'll hear from 4 students. I think Shelby's up first, so let's welcome Shelby.
I'm Shelby Mextroff, and I used the Poole Grant to go to Nicaragua last summer to participate in a program called Football Sin Fronteras, or Soccer Without Borders. I was in Nicaragua for about 2 weeks helping coach soccer sessions and gym classes to the local girls. This program is built on the goal of using soccer as a method of positive change. It teaches the girls commitment, hard work, and teamwork. The girls in Nicaragua live in a male-dominated society. When we went to schools, we would see the girls sitting on the side at gym, afraid to play with the boys. Many of the girls were even afraid to kick the ball while a boy was watching, because soccer and sports, for that matter, is not something that girls do. It is looked at as a male pastime, and I was able to talk to some of the girls my age in the program and hear about their lives. Many of them have stories of rape and abuse from males. The girls were afraid to stand up for themselves and thought that they were inadequate. But as I went through the program, they told me that soccer was giving the girls more respect in the town. They are out on the streets playing soccer with the boys and showing themselves that they can play sports like their male counterparts. Building a program based on these issues of a male-dominated society has helped the girls tremendously, and I loved being a part of it. It gives them a sense of meaning and something to believe in. When I was there, I helped organize a camp for the girls in town and tournaments for them to play in. In the barrio, I went out and played pickup games with the girls and boys on the street. I've grown up playing soccer, and I found a love for the game. So sharing my knowledge with these young girls was awesome, and I was able to watch as they found joy every time they learned a new trick or move. I was able to improve my Spanish, help young girls, and play a sport that I love all at the same time. I found out about it at soccer camp, but if you have any questions about my experience or the program, feel free to ask me. And it was an amazing experience and one that I've learned a lot from, so I'd encourage each of you to look into something that you would like to do for a Poole grant, whether related to travel or the environment, and apply for this great opportunity.
Hey everyone, I'm Carl Sangri, and this past summer I used the Poole grant to travel to Leadville, Colorado, and participate in the High Mountain Institute's 6-week summer term. This was actually my second Poole grant trip, and it combined academics and the outdoors. The schedule was 6 weeks long and remarkably compact and busy. I arrived on the campus at a dizzying 10,000-foot elevation, and after just 3 days I was out in the backcountry of Colorado and occasionally summiting mountains, which I thought would be displayed, but I guess not. I had never traveled far beyond the East Coast before, and so being out in the Rocky Mountains was absolutely mind-blowing. There were, herds of elk, violent thunderstorms, and breathtaking panoramic views that stretched for miles. After the initial 10-day expedition, I was back on campus, and that's when the academic component kind of went into full swing. There were essays, readings, presentations, and field trips as I worked towards my academic credits. The topics included studying the economic situation of the former mine town where I was in, studying human impacts on the environment, an intensive leadership course, and a humanities course that reflected on the more spiritual aspect of the community. Some of the more memorable projects included traveling to an old mine shaft entrance and obtaining water samples, and then we traveled to a local university where we analyzed the water samples for content of dangerous heavy metals like arsenic and lead. We found that the water coming out of the mine shaft and entering a nearby watershed had disconcertingly high levels of those heavy metals, and this was kind of part of the more broad course that was investigating the impact of the mining industry on the environment, and it kind of showed to me how, even with the efforts of Superfund sites and the EPA, and even though this mine was closed, half a century ago, that there were still pretty tremendous impacts. Another project was, actually, as you may recall, in Colorado this past summer, there were widespread forest fires, and we were able to travel to a burn site and look at the species composition of that area and then compare it to other untouched forests to, see the impact of the blazes. And then on the humanities side of things, I put together a short report on a Leadville resident after an interview and research. And between the academics and expeditions deep into the mountains, I also enjoyed miscellaneous activities like fly fishing, rock climbing, and rafting. And this whole experience hinged entirely on the Poole grant. I think if there's one takeaway from this speech, especially for all you sophomore and freshmen, it should be how easy it was to utilize the Poole grant. All it takes is finding a project that you think embodies service or, the outdoors in some way, writing up 2 brief essays, and then if your proposal is approved, you'll have a check in your P.O. box a couple weeks later. So, yeah, if you feel motivated to enrich yourself and others this summer rather than sit around at home or travel for pleasure, then the Poole grant is an amazing opportunity. It has greatly enriched me as a student and citizen, and for that I am thankful and encourage others to follow suit. Thank you.
My name's Katie, and thanks to the Poole grant, I was fortunate to spend 1 week in Coban, Guatemala this past summer. Upon receiving the grant, I applied to go on a trip with a team of Habitat for Humanity members of all ages whom I had never met, and spent 5 days of that week building a house for a family in need. Habitat for Humanity is a nonprofit organization that was founded on the belief that every individual should have a safe, decent, and affordable place to live. There were masons on the work site, so we helped them in the building process by moving cinder blocks, mixing cement, tying rebar, or filling gaps between the cinder blocks of the house with mortar. Each International Habitat for Humanity trip incorporates a cultural experience into the trip and a visit to a local school as well as building. So we played soccer a few evenings with local Guatemalans and visited a school one morning that consisted of 2 classrooms. Each classroom had students ranging from kindergarten ages all the way to 8th graders learning in the same room. I hope you realize how fortunate you are to be attending Taft. The most rewarding part of this experience came at the end of the week when we saw the gratitude on the faces of the families that we were building for. When we finished our work on the 5th day, I heard a woman give a prayer in Spanish, a language I do not know. She began crying and spoke with such passion and gratefulness. In those moments, I finally grasped the concept that I had impacted this woman and her family's lives in an inconceivable way. I could not understand what she was saying, but the emotion behind her words was clear. My trip to Guatemala with Habitat for Humanity helped me realize 2 things. I was not going to take anything for granted anymore, and there's a deeper meaning behind owning a home. I saw the poverty and hardship in Guatemala firsthand. I had been to places with similar circumstances before, but not with the same mentality I had on this trip. I was in Guatemala with a purpose. I wanted to improve someone else's way of life. I did not grow up entitled, so to speak, but I was never without a house, food, or clothes. I was now fully aware that even without the best of things growing up, I was beyond fortunate in the eyes of others. I left Guatemala determined to never look at my house, my family, or my school without truly appreciating them. There are Habitat affiliates located within the United States and in many other countries as well. So if you're interested in dedicating some of your time to provide someone else with a home, you could do something local or venture further away. I really encourage all of you to apply for the Poole or Page grant, to execute the Taft motto, and to experience a similar change in your outlooks. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Yuson Kim, and I'm here to tell you about my trip to the Dominican Republic last spring with my former school, Bame. Last March, the Poole grant sponsored me to travel to an orphanage called Hogar de Niños, or Children's Home. At first, everything bothered me with discomfort. Everybody spoke in a language that I couldn't understand a single word of, and the weather was unbearably hot. The orphanage lacked everything we take for granted, such as stable electricity, proper food, and clean water. I couldn't shower for a week. However, Children's Home lacked what it needed the most: parental care. Around 40 boys abandoned by their parents live at the orphanage, with the age varying from 4 to 19. Among them all, Jesus, the boy I was closest to, had the most shocking story. His father was a drug addict with a severe mental illness. When Jesus was 6 years old, his dad shot his mom and himself, leaving Jesus and his 2 brothers with nothing. Despite the absence of basic necessities, they seem to be the happiest people alive. Although the program is designed for us, the American students, to teach the boys a little bit of English and take care of them, we learn more from them. They teach us gratitude, a lesson we all need to be reminded of. Working with the orphanage in the Dominican Republic has given me the chance to experience different cultures and see the world from a different point of view. I've been able to share my gifts with those in need, while at the same time learning about humility and generosity of spirit from these children who have so little. Applying for a Poole grant is an ideal way to put Taft's motto of not to be served, but to serve into practice. We did it, and I encourage you all to take advantage of this great opportunity as well. It will help you be reminded of what you need to be grateful for. Thank you.
Katie mentioned the Meg Page grant. Mrs. Frew will talk about that, but just to give you an idea, the Page grant is to support students who are interested in doing work in the medical field. whether that's research or medical community service or what have you in the health area. So if you get interested in that, don't hesitate to see me. And as I say, Mrs. Frew will talk about it more. Just think about the themes that emerge there and reflect on whether they interest you. That notion that we sometimes are at our best and we learn things about ourselves and we move out of the comfort zone and we do things that are difficult. The ways in which, as a school, we can spread our own influence and serve others. The ways in which you can honor the motto of the school. The ways in which you honor someone like Bob Poole, and the ways in which you give. And how giving, I think, obviously, to use the cliche, comes back more. So think seriously about it. It is a great program. And going through the process itself of applying, writing an essay, applying for funds, is a very, very good process to go through. And it's quite remarkable when you do that. And as we heard, you go to your PO and there's a check for a couple $1,000s saying, we support you, we want you to have this experience. So any more I can do, don't hesitate to ask me. Let me give the class committees. Thank you all for participating in the process. It was very well done. The numbers of the voter turnout was very high. I will start with the youngest classes and then work our way up. I will read the names, and if you could stand if your name is called, and let's withhold our applause till the end. So the class of 2016, again, let me read these names and please stand. Kimberly Emmelsberg, I. Bui, Meme Ewald, Mary Lett, Amanda Roberts, Paige Whittemore, Carrie Kanata, Tristan Shea, Garrett Guini, Tom McMullen, Kevin Perez, Noah Telhami, and Henry Tillman. If they could stand, and we recognize them. Great. The class of 2015, again, please stand. Jane Andresen, Lauren Drakely, Jane Hodges, Colleen Iannone, Vienna Kalin, Zoe Klimley, Jake Kanata, Eli Cooper, David Gagas, Doug Goldstone, Quentin Harris, and Gabriel Menison. Please stand. The class of 2014, Charlotte Masucci, Margaret O'Neill, Maddie Olmsted, Sydney Robertson, Isabel Stack, Sue-Ann Young, Robert Brown, Chris Capice, John McMullen, William Reed, Tommy Robertshaw, and Sam Stamus. As you know, for many years, we've always done a midstream, if you will, monitor election. I think it's a great opportunity. I don't know exactly when it started. I think this started in the late 60s. There was a way in which a senior who's emerged as a leader could be added to the monitors. Over the years working with the Mons, I can tell you it's an incredible resource to have new faces come in. They bring in new energy, new perspectives, and often it's someone who perhaps has emerged as a leader over time. We never have set that number. It can be anywhere from 1 to 4. It's generally 2 or 3. And two things. I'd like those this year. There will be 3. I'd like them to come forward so we could recognize them. And I'd ask that the current school Mons meet in the choral room afterwards to welcome them as they come in there. So there are 3. And again, I'd ask them to come forward so we can recognize them. Let me say the names quickly and then we can acknowledge them. Shelby Mexstraw, Ben Tweedy, and Julian Whipler.